The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan mountains as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison studied the satellite images spread across the makeshift table. The intelligence briefing had been clear. A high-value target was hiding in a compound just outside the village of Khost, and time was running out. The target, a bomb maker responsible for dozens of coalition casualties, had to be captured or eliminated before he could slip across the border into Pakistan. Morrison looked up at his team of 8 Navy SEALs gathered around the table. These men had been through hell together over the past 18 months. Staff Sergeant Tony Rodriguez, the team's explosives expert, traced his finger along the route they would take. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Chen, their communications specialist, checked his radio equipment for the 3rd time. The rest of the team, Williams, Jackson, Parker, Davis, Thompson, and the newest member, Petty Officer Second Class Ryan Kelly, listened intently as Morrison outlined the mission. "The target is in this compound here," Morrison pointed to a cluster of buildings on the aerial photograph. "Intelligence suggests he's planning to move tonight, so we have a narrow window. We'll insert by helicopter 2 clicks north of the village and move in on foot. The approach is straightforward, but extraction could be tricky." Rodriguez leaned forward, studying the images. "What about civilians?" "Intel says minimal civilian presence in the immediate area, but we can't be sure. Rules of engagement remain standard. Positive identification required before engagement." Morrison's voice carried the weight of experience. He had led dozens of missions like this, and he knew that even the best-laid plans could go sideways fast. The helicopter insertion went smoothly. The MH-60 Blackhawk dropped them in a barren field under cover of darkness, and within minutes, the SEALs were moving through the rocky terrain toward their target. The night vision goggles painted the world in shades of green as they navigated the narrow paths that snaked through the mountains. Kelly, despite being the newest member, moved with the quiet confidence that had earned him a place on the team. He had been through the same grueling training as the others, but this was his first real combat mission. His heart pounded as they approached the village outskirts, but his training kept him focused and alert. The compound sat on a small hill overlooking the village, surrounded by a low stone wall. Morrison signaled for the team to take position. Through his scope, he could see guards patrolling the perimeter, 3 men with AK-47s moving in a predictable pattern. This was exactly what the intelligence had suggested. Chen whispered into his radio, confirming their position with headquarters. "Overwatch, this is Bravo Team. We're in position and beginning final approach." The response crackled back through their earpieces. "Copy, Bravo Team. You are cleared to proceed. Exfiltration helicopter will be standing by at Rally Point Alpha." Morrison made the hand signals, and his team moved into action. Rodriguez and Williams circled around to the back of the compound, while Jackson and Parker took the east side. Morrison, Chen, Kelly, Davis, and Thompson would assault through the front gate. It was a textbook operation they had practiced countless times. The first part went perfectly. Rodriguez's explosive charges neutralized the guards silently, and the team breached the compound walls simultaneously from 3 directions. The element of surprise was total. Within minutes, they had secured the main building and were searching room by room for their target. Kelly was the one who found him. In a back room, behind a false wall that Davis had detected with his equipment, the bomb maker was hiding with 2 laptops and several hard drives. The man tried to reach for a pistol, but Kelly was faster, tackling him to the ground and securing him with zip ties. "Target secured," Morrison reported over the radio. "Package is intact and we have additional intelligence materials." The prisoner was a thin man in his 40s with calloused hands that spoke of years working with explosive materials. His eyes darted nervously between the SEALs as they gathered up the electronic equipment. Through an interpreter on the radio, Morrison attempted to question him, but the man remained silent. The trouble started during the extraction. As the team prepared to leave the compound with their prisoner, Chen picked up radio chatter on the enemy frequencies. Local militia forces were mobilizing, and they knew about the American presence. "Sir, we've got company coming," Chen reported, adjusting his radio equipment. "Sounds like at least 20 fighters, maybe more. They're moving in from the south and east." Morrison quickly reassessed the situation. The planned extraction point was 2 kilometers away through open terrain. With enemy forces converging on their position, that route was no longer viable. "Change of plans," he announced. "We'll move north toward the bridge and cross there. It's longer, but it keeps us off the main roads where they'll be looking for us." The bridge was an old stone structure that spanned a deep gorge about 3 kilometers from the compound. Built decades ago, it was narrow but solid, designed for foot traffic and small vehicles. More importantly, it was the only crossing point for miles in either direction. The team moved out under cover of darkness, with Rodriguez taking point and Kelly helping to guard the prisoner. The bomb maker had not spoken since his capture, but his eyes suggested he was waiting for something. Morrison didn't like the look, but they had no choice but to bring him along. As they approached the bridge, the first shots rang out behind them. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness as militia fighters began pursuing them through the rocky terrain. The SEALs were well trained in moving quickly while under fire, but the presence of the prisoner slowed them down. "They're gaining on us," Williams reported from the rear guard position. "We need to pick up the pace." The bridge came into view as they crested a small rise. It stretched across the gorge like a stone finger, maybe 60 meters long and barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. On either side, the drop was at least 100 meters to the rocky bottom of the ravine. Morrison made a quick tactical decision. "Rodriguez, Jackson, get across and set up a defensive position on the other side. The rest of us will cover the crossing and then follow." It seemed like a solid plan. The narrow bridge would create a bottleneck that would work in their favor. The enemy couldn't bring superior numbers to bear effectively. But as Rodriguez and Jackson reached the midpoint of the bridge, everything went wrong. Explosions erupted simultaneously on both ends of the bridge. The blasts weren't large enough to collapse the structure, but they destroyed the approaches, leaving the stone span isolated over the gorge. Rodriguez and Jackson were thrown to the ground by the concussions, but they were alive and still on the bridge. Morrison's blood went cold as he realized what had happened. The prisoner had somehow signaled their location and route. The enemy had prepared for exactly this scenario. "It's a trap," he spoke into his radio, but the words felt inadequate for their situation. They were caught in the open with enemy forces approaching from behind and no way forward or back. Militia fighters emerged from concealed positions on both sides of the gorge, their weapons trained on the trapped SEALs. Morrison quickly counted at least 30 enemy combatants, far more than intelligence had suggested would be in the area. They had been set up from the beginning. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio from the far end of the bridge. "Sir, we're pinned down out here, taking fire from multiple positions. The bridge is solid, but we're exposed." Morrison looked at his remaining team members on his side of the bridge. Chen was already working his radio, trying to call for immediate extraction, while Williams and Parker scanned for defensive positions among the rocks. Kelly kept the prisoner covered, though Morrison suspected the man was no longer their most pressing problem. Davis pointed toward the enemy positions. "They've got us in a crossfire. If we try to cross, we'll be sitting ducks on that bridge, but if we stay here, they'll just surround us." The tactical situation was grim. The bridge was too narrow for effective movement under fire, too long to cross quickly, and too exposed to provide any cover. The enemy had chosen their ambush point perfectly. Thompson, who had been quietly observing the terrain, spoke up. "Sir, what about calling in close air support? Maybe we can clear a path." Morrison was already thinking along the same lines, but Chen was shaking his head. "No can do. Weather's moving in fast from the west. Heavy clouds and wind. No aircraft can operate in this area for at least 6 hours." The situation continued to deteriorate as more enemy fighters took positions around the gorge. They were patient, content to wait and let the trapped Americans make the first move. The SEALs were running low on ammunition after the firefight at the compound, and their options were dwindling fast. Kelly looked at Morrison with the expression of someone who was beginning to understand that they might not make it home. "Sir, what's the plan?" Morrison studied the bridge through his scope, watching Rodriguez and Jackson try to find whatever cover they could on the narrow stone structure. The enemy fire was sporadic but accurate. They were clearly experienced fighters who knew how to use the terrain to their advantage. "We hold our position and wait for an opportunity," Morrison finally answered, though privately he wondered what kind of opportunity could possibly present itself. The enemy had them exactly where they wanted them. As the first hints of dawn began to appear on the horizon, Morrison realized their situation was about to become even worse. Daylight would eliminate their night vision advantage and make them even more visible to enemy snipers. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. The radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. It was headquarters, and the voice belonged to Colonel Sarah Matthews, the operation commander. "Bravo, team. This is Overwatch 6. We have been monitoring your situation. Be advised that additional assets are being deployed to your location. Maintain your position and prepare for further instructions." Morrison felt a spark of hope. Additional assets could mean anything: more ground troops, air support, or maybe even special operations backup. But as he looked at the enemy positions surrounding them and his 2 men trapped on the bridge, he wondered if help would arrive in time. The enemy seemed to sense that something was changing. Their fire increased in intensity, and Morrison could see movement as more fighters took positions around the gorge. Whatever was coming, they wanted to finish this before it arrived. Rodriguez's voice cut through the radio chatter. "Sir, they're massing for an assault. Looks like they're tired of waiting." Morrison gripped his rifle tighter and prepared to make what might be their last stand. The bridge stretched out before them like a pathway to nowhere, with his men trapped in the middle and enemies closing in from all sides. The morning sun was rising, and with it came the realization that they were running out of time and options. Chen looked up from his radio equipment with an expression Morrison had never seen before, something between fear and grim determination. "Sir, I'm getting some kind of coded transmission. Someone's out there, but I can't make out who or where." As if in response to his words, a single rifle shot echoed across the gorge from somewhere high in the surrounding mountains. One of the enemy fighters near the bridge's far end dropped instantly. The precision and timing of the shot sent a ripple of confusion through the militia forces. Morrison didn't know who was behind that rifle, but for the first time since they had been trapped, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they might have a chance. The day was just beginning and their fight was far from over. The second sniper shot came 30 seconds after the first, and another militia fighter crumpled to the ground. This time, Morrison caught a glimpse of the muzzle flash high up on the eastern ridge, at least 800 meters away. Whoever was behind that rifle was an exceptional marksman, picking off targets with surgical precision from an almost impossible distance. The enemy forces were now scrambling for cover, their confident assault turning into confused retreat as they tried to identify where the shots were coming from. Morrison seized the momentary confusion to assess their situation. Rodriguez and Jackson were still trapped on the bridge, but the enemy fire directed at them had decreased significantly as the militia fighters dealt with this new threat. Chen was frantically working his radio, trying to establish contact with whoever was providing the sniper support. Unknown sniper, this is Bravo team. Please identify yourself and coordinate fires." The response came back in a calm, professional voice with a slight southern accent. "Bravo team, this is Falcon. I'm here to get you home. Maintain your positions and trust me to clear your path." Morrison felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Falcon wasn't a call sign he recognized from their operational briefing, and the voice definitely belonged to a woman. Female snipers were rare in special operations, and even rarer in this part of Afghanistan. But right now, he didn't care who was behind that rifle as long as they could help his team escape. "Falcon, this is Bravo 6, Morrison replied. "We have 2 men trapped on the bridge and need immediate support for extraction. Enemy forces are estimated at 30+, positioned around the gorge." "Copy that, Bravo 6. I have eyes on your position and have identified multiple targets. Beginning systematic engagement now. When I give the word, move your bridge team to the center span and get down flat." Another shot rang out, and a third enemy fighter dropped. This one had been trying to set up what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Morrison realized that Falcon wasn't just eliminating random targets. She was systematically removing the most dangerous threats to their position. The militia commander on the far side of the gorge was shouting orders in Pashto, trying to organize his men to deal with the sniper threat. Morrison could see them pointing toward the eastern ridge where the shots were coming from. Several fighters began moving in that direction, but they would need time to reach Falcon's position. Thompson, who had been observing the enemy movements through his scope, called out a warning. "Sir, they're flanking the sniper position. Looks like at least 6 fighters moving up the ridge from the north." Morrison made a quick decision. "Williams, Parker, you're with me. We're going to provide support fire and try to disrupt their flanking movement. Davis, Thompson, keep eyes on our prisoner and maintain overwatch on the bridge." As Morrison's small team maneuvered to a better firing position among the rocks, another precise shot from Falcon eliminated an enemy sniper who had been targeting Rodriguez and Jackson. The 2 SEALs on the bridge were now lying flat against the stone surface, trying to present the smallest possible target while still maintaining situational awareness. The battle was turning into a complex 3-way engagement. The militia forces were caught between the trapped SEALs and the mysterious sniper, forcing them to split their attention and resources. But Morrison knew this advantage was temporary. Once they organized and brought their superior numbers to bear, the outcome would be very different. Falcon's voice came through the radio again. "Bravo 6, I need you to create a distraction in 30 seconds. Light up the positions on the south side of the gorge. I need their attention focused on you while I reposition." Morrison didn't hesitate. "Copy that, Falcon. All Bravo elements, prepare for coordinated fire on the south positions in 30 seconds. When the 30 seconds were up, Morrison and his team opened fire on the militia positions across the gorge. The concentrated gunfire from their M4 carbines wasn't enough to cause significant casualties at that range, but it forced the enemy fighters to take cover and return fire, exactly what Falcon had requested. During the firefight, Morrison caught a glimpse of movement high on the eastern ridge. A figure in camouflaged gear was moving quickly between rock formations, carrying what looked like a heavy rifle. Even at that distance, Morrison could tell the person was smaller than most of the male snipers he had worked with. Falcon was definitely a woman, and she was repositioning under fire with the skill of a veteran operator. The flanking force that had been moving toward Falcon's original position arrived to find nothing but empty rocks. Their confused shouts carried across the gorge as they realized they had been outmaneuvered. Falcon had moved to a new position and was already setting up for her next series of shots. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio with increasing urgency. "Sir, Jackson's hit. Took one in the shoulder, but he's stable. We need to get off this bridge soon. They're starting to bracket us with mortars." Morrison's heart sank. Mortar fire would be devastating against targets trapped on the narrow bridge with no cover. He looked toward the far side of the gorge and could indeed see militia fighters setting up what appeared to be a small mortar tube. "Falcon, we have mortar teams setting up. Can you engage?" "I see them, Bravo 6. Stand by." The next shot was Falcon's longest yet, nearly 1,000 meters to the mortar position. The round struck the mortar operator center mass, and the weapon toppled over unused. The precision was incredible. Morrison had rarely seen shooting that accurate under combat conditions. But the militia forces were adapting quickly. Instead of presenting individual targets, They began moving in groups and using smoke grenades to obscure Falcon's line of sight. The tactical situation was becoming more complex by the minute. Chen received an urgent transmission from headquarters. "Bravo, team. Be advised that enemy reinforcements are en route to your position. Intelligence indicates additional hostile forces moving in from the east and south. Estimated time of arrival 45 minutes. Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him. They had less than an hour before the situation became completely untenable. Even with Falcon's support, they couldn't hold off a significantly larger force indefinitely. "Falcon, did you copy that transmission?" "Affirmative, Bravo 6. I heard. We need to get your people moving now. I'm going to clear the bridge approach, but you'll have to move fast." The window won't stay open long. Morrison watched as Falcon began a systematic engagement of the enemy positions closest to the bridge. Her rate of fire had increased, and each shot seemed to find its mark. But Morrison could also see that the militia forces were learning to stay in cover and move more cautiously. The element of surprise that had given Falcon her initial advantage was fading. Thompson suddenly called out a warning. "Sir, RPG team moving up on our right flank." Morrison spun to see two militia fighters carrying a rocket-propelled grenade launcher trying to get close enough to engage the SEAL's position. Before he could react, Falcon's rifle spoke again. The lead fighter dropped instantly, but the second man grabbed the RPG and continued forward. Williams took aim with his M4, but the range was long for the carbine. His first burst fell short, and the enemy fighter continued to advance. Morrison could see the man preparing to fire the RPG at their position. That's when Falcon demonstrated why she was there. Her next shot took the second fighter down just as he was shouldering the RPG launcher. The weapon fired wildly into the air, its rocket exploding harmlessly against the cliff face on the opposite side of the gorge. "Good shooting, Falcon," Morrison transmitted. "Just doing my job, Bravo 6. Now listen carefully. I'm going to give you a corridor to the bridge, but it won't last long. When I say go, you move fast and you don't stop until your people are across." Morrison gathered his team around him, including the prisoner who had remained silent throughout the entire engagement. Davis and Thompson had kept him secure, but Morrison wondered if the man was still valuable enough to risk additional lives getting him out. Kelly, who had been watching the eastern ridge through his scope, spoke up. "Sir, who is Falcon? I've never seen shooting like that outside of the training ranges." Morrison wished he knew the answer. Falcon's skills were clearly at the highest level, the kind of precision shooting that took years of training and combat experience to develop. But her call sign wasn't in any of the operational databases he was familiar with, and her presence in this area hadn't been mentioned in any briefings. Chen interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, I'm getting reports of helicopter movement to the southeast. Could be our extraction, but I can't confirm yet." The possibility of helicopter extraction brought new hope, but also new challenges. Any landing zone in the area would be under enemy observation and fire. They would need to reach a secure location and clear it of hostile forces before any aircraft could safely approach. Falcon seemed to read his thoughts. "Bravo 6, there's a clearing about 500 meters north of the bridge on your side. If you can reach it and establish security, it might work for extraction, but you'll need to get across that bridge first." Morrison studied the bridge through his scope. Rodriguez and Jackson were still pinned down in the center, with Jackson clearly favoring his wounded shoulder. The enemy forces had settled into defensive positions that provided good cover while maintaining fields of fire across the bridge approach. "Falcon, what's your ammunition status?" Morrison asked, knowing that even the best sniper had limitations. "I'm good for another 20-plus shots of precision work. Then I'll need to switch to a backup weapon. But Bravo 6, you need to know, those reinforcements are moving faster than expected. My overwatch shows dust clouds about 20 minutes out, maybe less." The timeline was compressing rapidly. Morrison made the decision that would define whether his team lived or died. "All Bravo elements prepare to move. We're going across that bridge in the next few minutes. Chen, get on the radio and guide that extraction bird to the northern clearing. Davis, Thompson, you stay with the package until we're across." Morrison looked at his men, professionals who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions and trained for exactly this kind of situation. They were scared, as any rational person would be, but they were ready. Kelly, despite being the newest member, had proven himself throughout the engagement. His calm professionalism under fire marked him as someone who belonged with this team. Parker pointed toward the far side of the gorge. "Sir, they're setting up another mortar position. Looks like they learned from the first one. This one's better concealed." Morrison could see it too. The militia forces had positioned the new mortar behind a large boulder where Falcon couldn't get a clear shot. If they got that weapon operational, crossing the bridge would become impossible. "Falcon, can you see the new mortar position?" "I see it, but I don't have a shot from this angle. I'm going to have to move again, and that's going to take time we don't have." Morrison realized they were facing a critical decision point. They could wait for Falcon to reposition and deal with the mortar, but that would give the reinforcements time to arrive. Or they could attempt the crossing now and hope they could move fast enough to avoid the mortar fire. Rodriguez's voice cut through the tactical discussion. "Sir, Jackson's getting worse. That shoulder wound is bleeding more than I thought. We need to get him medical attention soon." The decision was made for them. They couldn't wait any longer. Morrison keyed his radio. "Falcon, we're moving now. Give us whatever cover you can." "Copy that, Bravo 6. I'll keep their heads down as long as possible. When you start moving, don't stop for anything. That bridge is going to be the longest 60 meters of your life." As Morrison prepared to give the order to move, he caught one more glimpse of Falcon's position on the eastern ridge. For just a moment, he could see her silhouette against the morning sky, a lone figure with a rifle, holding off an entire militia force to save a team of strangers. Whoever she was, Morrison knew he owed her more than he could ever repay. The morning sun was climbing higher, and the shadows that had provided some concealment were beginning to disappear. Time was running out in every possible way. "All right, Bravo team," Morrison said into his radio. "This is it. Follow me, stay low, and trust Falcon to keep us alive." Morrison took a deep breath and stood up from behind the rocky cover. "Move, move, move!" The team burst from their positions and sprinted toward the bridge. Williams and Parker flanked out to provide covering fire, while Morrison, Chen, Kelly, Davis, and Thompson pushed forward with the prisoner between them. The distance to the bridge seemed to stretch out endlessly as enemy bullets began snapping through the air around them. Falcon's rifle spoke repeatedly from the eastern ridge, each shot precisely timed to eliminate the most immediate threats. Morrison could see enemy fighters dropping or diving for cover as Falcon systematically disrupted their attempts to concentrate fire on the running SEALs. But even her incredible marksmanship couldn't stop all of them. Chen stumbled as a bullet grazed his leg, but Kelly grabbed his arm and kept him moving. The radio operator gritted his teeth against the pain and continued forward, his equipment bouncing with each step. Behind them, Davis and Thompson were practically carrying the prisoner, who had finally begun to show fear as bullets whistled past his head. As they reached the bridge approach, Morrison could see Rodriguez waving them forward from the center span where he was crouched next to Jackson. The wounded SEAL was conscious but pale, his left arm hanging useless at his side. "First team across!" Morrison shouted into his radio. "Williams, Parker, lay down suppressive fire!" Williams and Parker dropped to prone positions and began firing controlled bursts at the enemy positions, forcing the militia fighters to keep their heads down. Their M4 carbines chattered steadily as they worked their way through their remaining ammunition. Morrison led the first group onto the bridge. The stone structure was narrower than it had appeared from a distance, barely wide enough for two men to run side by side. The ancient stones were worn smooth by decades of foot traffic, making footing treacherous for men carrying heavy gear and moving at full speed. Halfway across, the mortar that had been worrying Morrison finally opened fire. The first round impacted 20 meters short of the bridge, sending up a shower of rock and dust. Morrison could hear the tube being adjusted for the next shot. "Falcon, we need that mortar eliminated now," he called into his radio while continuing to run. "Working on it, Bravo 6. Keep moving." From her new position higher up on the ridge, Falcon had a partial angle on the concealed mortar position. She couldn't see the crew directly, but she could see the muzzle of the tube when it fired. As the second mortar round left the tube, Falcon's bullet struck the weapon just behind the muzzle, damaging the barrel and causing the round to detonate prematurely. The explosion eliminated the mortar crew and ended that threat permanently. Morrison reached Rodriguez and Jackson in the center of the bridge just as the damaged mortar exploded on the far side of the gorge. "How bad is he?" Morrison asked, looking at Jackson's wound. "Lost some blood, but he can move," Rodriguez replied. "Sir, they've been trying to flank us from both ends of the gorge. Falcon's been keeping them back, but there's a lot of them." Morrison could see what Rodriguez meant. Enemy fighters were visible on both sides of the ravine, moving through the rocks and trying to get into positions where they could fire down onto the bridge. Falcon was engaging targets as fast as she could acquire them, but there were too many for one sniper to handle indefinitely. The second group reached the bridge as Williams and Parker fell back from their covering positions. Chen was limping but moving under his own power, while Davis and Thompson continued to manage the prisoner. The bomb-maker's eyes were wide with terror as he realized that the Americans might actually escape, despite being outnumbered and surrounded. "Everyone across now," Morrison ordered. "No stopping until we reach the other side." The final dash across the bridge became a race against time and ammunition. Falcon's rate of fire increased to an almost impossible pace as she tried to suppress the growing number of enemy positions targeting the bridge. Morrison could see muzzle flashes from at least a dozen locations around the gorge as the militia forces poured fire onto the narrow stone span. Thompson cried out as a bullet struck his pack, but he kept running. The prisoner stumbled and Kelly grabbed him with one arm while maintaining his grip on his rifle with the other. Bullets were striking the stone around them, sending up sparks and chips of ancient masonry. Rodriguez was helping Jackson move as fast as the wounded man could manage. Blood from Jackson's shoulder wound was leaving a trail on the bridge stones, but he refused to slow down the team. I'm good," he kept repeating through gritted teeth. As the team approached the far end of the bridge, Morrison could see enemy fighters moving to cut off their escape route. The militia commander had anticipated their movement and was positioning his forces to trap them on the far side of the gorge. That's when Falcon made the decision that would save all their lives. From her position 800 meters away, she could see the tactical situation developing. The SEALs would reach the far side of the bridge only to find themselves facing a prepared ambush with no cover and no retreat. There was only one way to clear their path, but it would require her to abandon her concealed position and expose herself to enemy fire. Bravo 6, when you reach the end of the bridge, go left toward that pile of boulders. I'm going to clear the path, but you need to move fast when I do. Falcon, negative. Don't expose yourself for us. Too late, Bravo 6. I'm already moving. High on the eastern ridge, Falcon left her concealed sniper position and began moving down the slope toward the enemy fighters who were preparing to ambush the escaping SEALs. She had switched from her precision rifle to a lighter carbine that would allow her to move and shoot more quickly. Morrison reached the end of the bridge and immediately saw the problem. At least 8 militia fighters were positioned in a rough line across their escape route, hidden behind rocks and ready to open fire as soon as the Americans left the bridge. It was a perfect killing field with no escape. Then Falcon appeared. She came down the slope like a force of nature, moving through the enemy positions with a speed and aggression that caught the militia fighters completely off guard. Her carbine fired in short, controlled bursts as she systematically eliminated targets from their flank. The fighters who had been focused on the bridge approach suddenly found themselves under attack from an unexpected direction. Morrison watched in amazement as Falcon moved through the rocks with the fluid grace of someone who had been in combat situations dozens of times. She wasn't just shooting. She was thinking 3 moves ahead, using the terrain and her mobility to stay 1 step ahead of the enemy response. "Go, go, go!" Falcon's voice came through the radio as she engaged the last of the ambush positions. "Path is clear, but not for long." Morrison led his team off the bridge and toward the boulder pile Falcon had indicated. It provided the first real cover they had seen in hours, and they reached it just as enemy reinforcements began arriving from the south. Chen was immediately on his radio, calling for the extraction helicopter. Dust off, this is Bravo team. We need immediate extraction at the northern clearing. We have 1 urgent surgical and multiple walking wounded." The response came back quickly. "Bravo team, dust off is inbound to your location. ETA 12 minutes. Clear and secure the landing zone." 12 minutes seemed like an eternity with enemy forces closing in from multiple directions, but Morrison knew they could hold out that long if Falcon could continue to disrupt the enemy advance. "Falcon, what's your status?" Morrison called. "I'm mobile and moving to overwatch the extraction site. Bravo 6, you need to get to that clearing now. The reinforcements are less than 10 minutes out, and there are a lot of them." Morrison could see the dust clouds on the southern horizon that marked the approaching enemy vehicles. They carried at least 50 additional fighters, possibly more. Once those forces arrived, no amount of skill or bravery would be enough to save them. The team moved out from the boulder pile with Jackson supported between Rodriguez and Kelly. Thompson's pack had been shredded by the bullet strike, but he was uninjured. Chen was favoring his wounded leg, but still functional. Davis continued to guard the prisoner, who seemed to realize that his rescue was not coming. The clearing was exactly where Falcon had said it would be, a flat area about the size of a football field surrounded by low hills that would provide defensive positions. Morrison immediately began organizing his team to secure the perimeter while they waited for the helicopter. "Williams, Parker, take the north side. Rodriguez, you stay with Jackson. Chen, get that bird talked in here. Everyone else, spread out and watch for enemy movement." As his team took positions around the clearing, Morrison finally had a moment to think about the woman who had saved their lives. Falcon had demonstrated skills that went far beyond normal military training. Her marksmanship was exceptional, but more importantly, her tactical thinking and ability to adapt to changing situations marked her as a veteran operator of the highest caliber. "Falcon, who are you?" Morrison asked over the radio. There was a pause before she responded. "Someone who doesn't leave people behind, Bravo 6. That's all you need to know." The sound of rotor blades grew louder as the extraction helicopter approached from the north. Morrison could see it in the distance, a UH-60 Blackhawk flying low and fast toward their position. At the same time, enemy fighters were beginning to appear on the hills around the clearing. Falcon's rifle spoke again from somewhere in the rocks above them. An enemy fighter who had been setting up what looked like an RPG position dropped instantly. Her precision was still perfect, even after hours of continuous engagement. "Dust off. This is Bravo team," Chen called into his radio. "Landing zone is marginally secure. We have enemy forces in the immediate area. Request immediate pickup." "Copy. Bravo team, coming in hot. Be ready to move fast." The Black Hawk flared hard as it approached the clearing, its door gunners scanning for targets. Morrison could see the crew chief waving them forward as the aircraft settled onto the ground, with its rotors still turning. "Move! Everyone move!" Morrison shouted. His team ran for the helicopter while Falcon provided covering fire from the hills. Rodriguez and Kelly carried Jackson between them, moving as fast as they could toward the open cabin door. Thompson and Davis pushed the prisoner ahead of them, while Williams and Parker provided rear security. As Morrison reached the helicopter, he turned back toward the hills where Falcon was still engaging enemy targets. He could see muzzle flashes from her position as she held off the growing number of militia fighters who were trying to rush the clearing. "Falcon, we're at the bird. Time to go." "Negative, Bravo 6. I've got my own ride. Get your people out of here." Morrison hesitated for a moment, torn between his duty to his own team and the obligation he felt toward the woman who had saved their lives. But Rodriguez was pulling him toward the helicopter, and the crew chief was shouting that they needed to leave immediately. The Black Hawk lifted off just as enemy forces reached the edge of the clearing. Morrison watched through the cabin window as Falcon's position continued to emit muzzle flashes, keeping the militia fighters pinned down until the helicopter was safely out of range. 20 minutes later, as they approached the main operating base, Morrison finally allowed himself to believe that they were going to make it home. Jackson was receiving medical attention from the crew chief. Chen's leg wound had been bandaged, and the prisoner was secured for interrogation. The mission had been a success, but it had cost them far more than it should have. "Sir," Kelly said over the helicopter noise, "do you think we'll ever find out who Falcon really was?" Morrison looked out at the Afghan landscape passing below them. Somewhere down there, a woman with extraordinary skills had risked her life to save a team of strangers. Her identity remained a mystery, but her actions spoke louder than any introduction ever could. 3 weeks later, Morrison received a classified briefing that answered some of his questions about Falcon. She was Master Sergeant Sarah Collins, a veteran special operations sniper who had been conducting a solo reconnaissance mission in the area when she intercepted their distress calls. Her official record showed deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several classified locations around the world. The briefing also revealed that Collins had requested to remain in the field rather than return to headquarters after the bridge incident. She was continuing her reconnaissance mission, operating alone in the mountains along the Pakistan border. Morrison wasn't surprised. Someone with her skills and dedication wouldn't be satisfied with a desk job back home. 6 months later, Morrison received word that Collins had been killed in action during another rescue operation. She had died while providing sniper support for a helicopter crew that had been shot down in the same mountain region where she had saved Morrison's team. The crew survived because of her intervention. At her memorial service, Morrison met Collins' family for the first time. Her father was a retired Marine sniper, and her brother was serving with the Army Rangers. The precision shooting and tactical brilliance that had saved Morrison's team were family traits, passed down through generations of military service. Collins's mother approached Morrison after the ceremony. "Sarah never talked much about her missions," she said, "but she did mention a team of Navy SEALs she helped on a bridge in Afghanistan. She said they were good men who deserved to make it home." Morrison struggled to find the right words. "Ma'am, your daughter saved our lives. Without her, none of us would have made it off that bridge." The woman smiled sadly. "That was Sarah. She always said her job was to make sure the good guys won. I'm glad she was able to do that for you." As Morrison drove home from the service, he thought about the random circumstances that had put Collins in position to help his team that day. She had been conducting a routine reconnaissance mission when she heard their radio traffic and decided to get involved. A woman he had never met had risked everything to save men she didn't know, asking nothing in return except that they make it home safely. The bridge in Afghanistan was still there, according to intelligence reports. Local villagers had repaired the approaches that had been damaged in the ambush, and it once again served as a crossing point for foot traffic and small vehicles. But Morrison knew that for him and his team, that bridge would always be remembered as the place where a stranger's courage had meant the difference between life and death. Kelly, who had been promoted and was now leading his own team, sometimes asked Morrison about that day. The young SEAL had grown into an exceptional operator, shaped by the experience of seeing what true professionalism looked like under impossible circumstances. "Do you think she knew she probably wouldn't make it home?" Kelly asked during one of their conversations. Morrison considered the question carefully. Collins had operated alone in hostile territory for months, taking risks that most operators would never accept. She had chosen a lifestyle that prioritized mission success and saving others over personal safety. "I think she knew the risks," Morrison finally answered. "But I also think she knew that some things are worth those risks. Getting good people home safely was one of them." The prisoner they had captured that day, the bomb maker who had led them into the ambush, eventually provided intelligence that prevented dozens of future attacks. His capture had been worth the mission, but Morrison often wondered if it had been worth Collins's life. She had never known the ultimate value of the mission she had helped complete. Years later, Morrison retired from the Navy and became an instructor at the SEAL training facility. When he taught courses on small unit tactics and combat leadership, he often used the bridge incident as a case study, but he never mentioned Collins by name, respecting the classified nature of her work even after her death. Instead, he told his students about the importance of having people like Falcon watching over them, skilled professionals who would risk everything to ensure that the good guys made it home. He taught them that special operations was about more than individual heroics. It was about a community of warriors who looked out for each other regardless of service branch, unit affiliation, or personal acquaintance. The lesson Morrison emphasized most strongly was that in the darkest moments, when everything seemed hopeless and survival appeared impossible, there were people like Collins out there. They operated in the shadows, asking for no recognition and expecting no reward beyond the knowledge that they had done their job and done it well. "This is our end," Morrison had thought on that bridge, surrounded by enemies and cut off from support. But it hadn't been their end, because one woman with a rifle had decided that it wouldn't be. She had cleared their path when no path seemed possible, and she had asked for nothing in return except that they honor her sacrifice by continuing to serve. The bridge remained, the mission was complete, and the team had made it home. But the debt to Master Sergeant Sarah Collins, call sign Falcon, would never be fully repaid.